Chapter 587. She knew that she had a great influence on him. If she was careless, she would really become a demoness who would bring disaster to the country. However, to be honest, Jingwan didn't feel heavy about this. Because if she felt heavy, then to some extent, it meant that a Yuan's love for her had become heavy. She would always deny this. No matter how heavy the responsibility was, she would gladly endure it. However, Jingwan wouldn't say this out loud, because Great Elder Princess wouldn't understand that even though she and Prince Consort Jiang were a rare loving couple in the eyes of outsiders, and even in her own heart, in fact, there was a third party between them, and the third party had a child. In Jingwan's eyes, this was absolutely intolerable. Therefore, if you want to be a good woman of a ruler, you have to know him better than anyone else. You have to know his emotions and understand his thoughts. Besides, you have to remember one thing at all times. As a husband and a father in the future, he is a ruler first. And in the heart of a wise ruler, the people in the world are the first priority. Jingwan knew very well that her husband actually knew his position very well. He didn't need others to teach him what to do. His goal had never been to be famous for all the years. He thought that he could be a foolish, tyrannical, and wise ruler. Those who didn't know him would never know these things. Therefore, she really knew him best. Because Great Elder Princess cared about Qi Yuan, she hoped that Li Han Yuan could be a good emperor. Because he clearly had the ability. If he took a different road, it would make people sad and hateful. She hoped that Jingwan could be a rope that tied Li Han Yuan. When necessary, she could properly persuade him not to really follow his mood. In the past, he was capricious and rash, and what he caused was just a small splash. In the future, if he was capricious and rash, he might cause a storm that drowned Qi Yuan. Wan. Great Elder Princess looked at Jingwan seriously and asked, "Can you accommodate a ruler in your heart?" Jingwan was extraordinarily calm. She said with a smile, "Foster mother, I can accommodate a Yuan in my heart." Great Elder Princess frowned. She just wanted to remind Jingwan and didn't want her answer. However, Jingwan gave the answer so easily and calmly. Obviously, she couldn't understand this answer very well. Even so, this answer didn't satisfy her. "Foster mother, don't worry. I know what to do. I also know what I'm doing." Great Elder Princess's eyebrows relaxed a little. "I always know that you are a good person. When there was a conflict between righteousness and personal feelings would still exist, but they might change a little." Jingwan was also very clear that Great Elder Princess's requirements for a princess and an empress must be very different. She might have been satisfied with her in all kinds of ways, and there was nothing bad about her. However, since it was confirmed that her husband would ascend the throne, she began to scrutinize her and perhaps even criticize her a lot. However, according to Great Elder Princess's intelligence, she didn't know how to say these things. After all, even if Great Elder Princess came out of retirement, she was even less important than when Emperor Lu was still alive. Great Elder Princess's mansion used to rely on her, but in the future, it might rely on her husband, children, and grandchildren. A brother's power was not as good as a father's, and a nephew's power was not as good as a brother's. Although she could still suppress others as an elder, it obviously didn't work on Li Han Yuan. He even punished his own father. If others dared to put on airs in front of him, they would be courting death. Because she could see clearly, she didn't even mention a word about Emperor Lu. Everything was so simple. When Great Elder Princess left the palace, she met Ruan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan, who were going out of the palace. Obviously, the two were still discussing something. It was not surprising that they met Great Elder Princess at this time. They looked at each other and walked up to her. "Greetings, Great Elder Princess. Your Excellencies, you are too polite. I've been waiting here for Lord Luo." Great Elder Princess didn't beat around the bush. Ruan Ruizhong was about to leave, but was stopped by Great Elder Princess. "Your Excellency, you can listen to us together." Thus, the two of them respectfully listened. "Just now, I went to the Central Palace and met with Jinqin Wang Fei. I told her about the new emperor. As for what I said, you should know in your hearts. What kind of personality the new emperor has, we all know. I'm just worried Even though I am Jin Xinhuang Fei's adoptive mother, there is still a layer separating us. So I hope that Luo Darren can... Great Elder Princess. Luo Peishan interrupted her timely. Court officials are not allowed to interfere with the imperial harem, especially relatives of relatives. And the imperial harem is not allowed to interfere in politics. Great Elder Princess choked, and her face changed. The rule said so, but few people took it seriously. However, when it was said on the surface, you couldn't clearly refute it. Great Elder Princess looked at Luo Peishan's elegant and gentle face. He was obviously an old fox. Great Elder Princess. Although the new emperor hasn't ascended the throne yet, he handles things decisively and has his own rules. The new emperor cares about the people and has his own world. He will definitely be a wise emperor. Luo Peishan said meaningfully. Great Elder Princess was silent for a moment and sighed softly. In that case, there's nothing to worry about. In the end, he made a concession. If he said too much, he would bring trouble to himself. After all, the person who was going to sit on the throne was an adult, not a child. Anyone's doubts were undoubtedly a provocation. Great Elder Princess only dared to say a few words because of her status. If it were a minister who tried to do so, wouldn't he feel that his position was too stable, too steady? And Great Elder Princess also had to stop. After Great Elder Princess left, Luo Peishan sighed. My granddaughter will probably be the most hard-working empress in history. In fact, Luo Peishan and Ruan Ruizong knew what Jingwan was about to face. They had always regarded Jingwan as the rein that could tie Li Hongyuan, so that Li Hongyuan would not run wild. If Li Hongyuan was not restrained, it was really hard to predict what he would do. However, no one wanted to try. Not necessarily. If His Majesty really loves her, he won't let her work hard. He had a chance to stop himself, instead of the Empress pulling the rein with all her strength all the time. Lord Ruan, you seem to have never worried about it. That's because I believe in the girl taught by Lord Luo. Although I have little contact with Consort Jean, there are some things that I can see clearly. Luo Peishan smiled and did not say anything. He naturally believed in the child taught by his wife. Because he believed in her, he would not go to her and say something like Great Elder Princess, which was unnecessary. As the person who shared his bed, she should know more than anyone else. She had already thought about her position. It wasn't a day or two, but 2 or 3 years. This period of time might not be very long, but it was enough for a person to think about a matter. The two continued to move forward hand in hand, and there was no need to avoid anything. However, things may still be a little troublesome. What do you mean, Lord Ruan? Lord Luo, what do you think is the possibility of the harem not interfering in politics? Luo Peishan was silent for a moment, and then gave an answer. 0. Even if he did not take the initiative, the new emperor would probably send it in person. Moreover, Luo Peishan could feel that his granddaughter was actually very ambitious. It was fine that she did not sit on the throne, but since she had already sat on it, it was difficult for her to not do something. His Majesty will deal with the trouble. Yes, even if he was the emperor, he could not only create trouble. He had to deal with some troubles and could not let them take all the blame. The officials, assisted the emperor to deal with the state affairs. They should not let the emperor deal with all the state affairs alone, and then they would have to deal with personal troubles for him. Then, when Luo Peishan went back, he encountered a little trouble, which came from Sunny Jia. It was about the death exemption gold medallion that she had long forgotten. At the beginning of the country, there were 4 dukes and 9 marquises, and there were 13 gold medallions. Each gold medallion could be used 3 times. Even if one committed treason, he could use this gold medallion to avoid the death penalty. The number of people who could be exempted from the death penalty varied from 1 to 9. If the crime did not warrant death, he could even be exempted from the crime of the whole family. The most important thing was that as long as the Qi Yuan was not destroyed, the gold medallion would always be effective. The power of this death exemption gold medallion was too great, and it left a lot of trouble for the future generations. The emperors after Taizu even used some sinister means to take back the 13 gold medallions one after another. There was only one chance left for the last gold medallion. Old Madam's son took it from Duchess Ding to compensate son Ijia. This was originally a matter that no one knew, but this time it may have been forced. Someone followed the clues, and little by little, they actually found out that it was son Ijia. When she first got the death exemption gold medallion, son Ijia only thought that Jin Wang was too hateful. No matter which prince ascended the throne, it would be unfavorable to him. Son Ijia only wanted to give Jingwan a guarantee. Things changed later, until today's situation was not surprising. However, that gold medallion had long been forgotten. Now that it was remembered at this juncture, it did not seem to be a very surprising thing. Sun Yijia was somewhat tangled. She did not know how to deal with it. The gold medallion was of no use to Jingwan, but it was completely different in the hands of others. The key now was that her husband was the one in power. The rest of the people rebelled against their superiors. From Jingwan's point of view, they deserved it. From this point of view, she had no way to speak to Jingwan. However, Duke Ding's Fu, in the end, raised her up. It was fine if there was no way at all, but if there was a glimmer of opportunity, she still could not be indifferent. Although the final verdict had not been handed down, but when Prince Kong forced the abdication, her biological father was an absolute accomplice. Therefore, there was absolutely no possibility of escape. Now, with her father as the leader, the three clans were all in prison, except for the married daughter. Her bear brothers who returned to their hometown to observe mourning would soon be arrested and brought back to the capital. Sun Yijia could not make up her mind, so she went to find Madame Luo. It was about the time when she came back looking for Luo Peishan, Jingwa's wife. You should know that regardless of whether you want to take back the death-free gold medallion, Duke Ding's Fu is not something that can be protected by a death-free gold medallion. Sun Yijia sat upright, slightly lowered her head, and smiled bitterly. When grandmother gave me the gold medallion, she said the same thing. So when she insisted on giving it to me, I accepted it. It's just that. Are you mainly worried about your grandmother? Madame Luo asked. Sun Yijia nodded. In fact, Sun Yijia was not really indifferent when the people of Duke Ding's Fu were in prison. At least, she could not ignore her grandmother. However, even if her grandmother was in prison, it was not a big deal. That was why she could bluntly refuse others when they came to her door. Speaking of which, because she married into the Luo family was kind, so she was not affected. One must know that although the crime of a married daughter was not serious, because it involved rebellion, many people divorced those women in order to curry favor with the new emperor. Even if they were not divorced, their future life and their husband's family would definitely not be easy. Sun Yijia knew that she should be content, but her heart was made of flesh. How could she really have a heart of stone? Grandmother is already old and can't bear the pain of being exiled. And my father, after all, gave birth to me. Your grandmother will not be on the list of people to be exiled. At that time, you can take her to the Luo family and settle her down. As for your father, it is absolutely impossible to save him. The new emperor is not like others. He is not a rule-abiding person, let alone a gold medallion. Even if it is 10 or 100 pieces, it is useless. Something like the gold medallion will only anger him. Even if he is forced by Taizu's decree to let you exercise the right of the gold medallion, he will find another way to execute your father. And I'm afraid that the number of people who will die will increase, and the involvement will increase. The people who will be affected will include you, including your children. You and the third girl are close, and your children are her nephews and nieces. Can she bear to see you suffer? At that time, pleading with the new emperor may cause their relationship to be at odds. Is this what you want to see? Luo Peishan explained softly to her. Luo Peishan seemed to have a good attitude, but these words all poked Sun Yijia's Achilles heel. He was lenient, but his leniency towards Sun Yijia was not because of her, but because of his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-granddaughters. In some areas, he was not qualified to be a scholar official, but in some areas, he was definitely a scholar official. Except for his first wife, the other women who married into the Luo family were not completely part of the Luo family in his heart. When necessary, he could also give them up very happily. Madame Luo was very clear about this. In her eyes, compared to Jingwan, Sun Yijiao was far inferior. Speaking of which, they still did not know what Sun Yijiao did. If they knew, Sun Yijiao would not even have the chance to sit here. Go back, don't think so much. Since your father made such a choice, then at the beginning, he should have thought about the consequences if he failed. When the matter is over, bring your grandmother here and properly settle her down. Take care of her until she is old, and it can be considered as filial piety for your father. Madame Luo said, when it was impossible to have the best of both worlds, this heart made of flesh would definitely be biased. It was obvious how Sun Yijiao would choose. Moreover, she was not optimistic about Prince Kong since a long time ago. At that time, she had faintly thought that there might be a day like today. In fact, she had already made a decision in her heart. It was just that she could not let herself cut off the last link and needed someone else to do it. Now, her heart seemed to be more relaxed. She was indeed a selfish person. Mocking herself in her heart, she stood up. Granddaughter-in-law will retire. After Sun Yijiao left, Madame Luo took a sip of tea. In the end, Wan did not misjudge her. If this is disappointing, then she really doesn't know what's good for her. This matter was over. If someone came to find Sun Yijiao again, she did not deny it and bluntly said that the item was no longer in her hands. At that time, it was brought to Jin Xin Wang Fei to add to her dowry. Thus, that item was most likely in the hands of a new emperor. Something like the death exemption gold medallion was of great importance. Who knew how many people wanted it? Sun Yijiao could not hide it completely. Moreover, that item was special and could not be dissolved privately. Thus, it was best to tell the truth. It could be dug out by anyone. In the hands of the new emperor, Sun Yijiao was naturally scolded again. Brainless, stupid, of course, old Madame Sun, who gave the item to Sun Yijiao, would definitely be angered. At a time of life and death, naturally, no one would care about her identity. Those sisters-in-law, daughters-in-law, granddaughters-in-law, niece-in-law, and so on, who were also locked in prison, all scolded her. However, probably because they expected this kind of situation, Luo family arranged a separate place for old Madame Sunday. Thus, they could only scold her. And all of this had no effect on old Madame Sunday. Even if Xiao, sorrowful, cried, she was still indifferent. In terms of ruthlessness, she was also one of the top. She could drug her own daughter and watch her own son die. As the saying goes, true harm came from the people she cared about. What could the people she did not care about do to her? No one knew better than her about the decline of Duke Dinghua's residence. If she really wanted to save it, she would not have closed her door to abstain from meat and pray to Buddha. She would not have ignored everything, and she would not have given something like the death exemption golden medallion to Sun Yijiao. Therefore, she was calmer than anyone else in the prison cell. The commotion caused by this matter was not small. For a time, it even caused a small storm. Some people did not give up. They did not believe that Sun Yijiao would be so stupid as to give such a precious item to someone else. They tried every means to dig it out. However, the current Luo family was not the same as before. In the past, when Luo Peishan was in charge, they did not dare to be presumptuous, let alone now. Li Hongyuan did not hold a court, but he held a small court meeting. All the officials who were supposed to be present were present. He directly threw the death exemption golden medallion out, and it fell to the ground with a bang. He was disrespectful to his father, and he also did not care about his ancestors. It also clearly showed the court officials that a broken medallion could not be of any use to him. Whoever wants it, feel free to take it, Li Hongyuan said in a light tone. His subordinates all kept quiet out of fear. Even the imperial censor did not dare to say anything about Li Hongyuan's disrespect to his ancestors. As for Li Hongyuan's faults, they had all disappeared into the ocean. 2 days ago, there was one courageous official who had sent a memorial to remonstrate with him. In the end, Li Hongyuan had ordered people to turn his background upside down. Li Hongyuan then casually retorted with a few words, causing him to almost die on the spot as an apology. Li Hongyuan did not take off his official status, but the effect of killing the chicken to warn the monkey was quite obvious. After a few days, They had basically understood that it was best for them to not nitpick on Li Honyuan and do their own business. Even if it was a matter of national importance, if he directly ordered them to do so, it was best for them not to open their mouths if he did not ask. It was true that he was a dictator. However, even if he was a dictator, there were still no decisions that people felt were wrong. February 2nd, the dragon raised its head. The new emperor ascended the throne, and the empress was conferred. Li Hongyuan's ascension ceremony came first, and Jingwan's conferment of the empress came later. The dragon and phoenix robes had already been sent over. Jingwan dragged her heavy body and helped Li Honyuan change his clothes. Because it was a special occasion, she wanted to do it herself. Li Honyuan did not stop her. He only quietly looked down at her beautiful face and waited for her to button the last button on her collar. "Your Majesty's appearance is unparalleled." Li Honyuan gently held her hand. "My wife's beauty is unparalleled since ancient times." This kind of praise, even Jingwan's current face couldn't help but burn a little. However, her praise for him came from the bottom of her heart and should be recognized. His feelings for her were probably more like beauty in the eye of the beholder. At this special time, Jingwan's face was red, but she also accepted it with a smile. Jingwan helped Li Honyuan change his clothes. At this moment, Li Honyuan also returned the courtesy. Jingwan's eyes flashed, but she didn't refuse. Zongyi was the most ceremonious of the 3Ds. It could be said to be a phoenix robe. Her ornaments were decorated with flowers of 12 trees, and her hair was both broad and broad. Her clothes were made of dark green, and her inscriptions were in the shape of a zhai. Siam muslin in the middle, zhai collar, luo ho in the middle, zhai is the seal, zhai is the third class. The large belt followed the color of the clothes, vermilion, and the outside, vermilion brocade on top, green brocade on bottom. New York used the green group, and the leather belt used the green clothes. The white jade double pendants, the black group, 2 large ribbons, 3 small 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 ribbons, and 3 small ribbons. Accepting the imperial register, assisting in the sacrificial offering, and attending court meetings, all other important matters would be handled by him. There were countless women in the imperial harem. Those who entered the imperial harem did everything they could to ensure that their clothes did not fall into the hands of others. As for the rest, they did everything they could to win the imperial harem, all for the sake of the imperial harem. Jingwan stood in front of the glass mirror and looked at the woman in the phoenix robe. Although her belly was difficult to hide, she still had a noble aura. She couldn't help but feel a trace of emotion in her heart. She was so lucky to have the emperor's love. She didn't have to fight with any other woman. She could wear this set of clothes and become the mother of the world. Today was her 18th birthday. She had been in this world for 18 years. According to her previous life, this was the day she came of age. The man she loved, who loved her, had given her an unparalleled birthday gift, supreme honor, equal honor. She sighed and felt sweet in her heart. At the same time, she was ready to accept the responsibility. He loved her without regrets, and she would never leave him. She was not afraid of any challenges. Chapter 588. No one was more suitable than her, and she was the only suitable person. Jingwan turned around and looked at Li Honyuan with a smile. She leaned sideways, stood on tiptoe, and kissed him on the lips. "You didn't eat honey today, but as long as Wanwan is by my side, I feel as if I'm eating honey all the time. If my heart is sweet, it's natural that I feel sweet everywhere." Li Honyuan wantonly displayed his sweet and charming aura. His skill of speaking sweet words had been maxed out and had evolved to the master level. Although Jingwan was basically immune to it, few people didn't like to hear nice words. If she felt sweet, wouldn't it be good for the baby in her belly? Back in the prince's residence, the servants who served Jingwan were used to this kind of scene. No matter how thin-skinned they were, they didn't react. However, the servants of Ikuan Palace weren't so experienced. Although this wasn't the first time they had seen such a scene, they still couldn't help blushing. A few of the palace maids couldn't help sneaking glances at Li Honyuan. There was nothing they could do about it. He was the emperor and was born with unparalleled good looks. Moreover, he looked so gentle and affectionate. It was normal for love to sprout in their hearts. Obviously, they had thrown some rumors beyond the clouds. Perhaps they believed that seeing was believing and hearsay was false. The emperor had nothing to do with the person in the rumors. Naturally, there were people who saw the thoughts of these people. They only felt that these little girls were really very naive. Whether it was pure love or wild ambition, they never knew that the new emperor gave all his gentleness to one person. If anyone else wanted to covet and try to get a share of it, they would definitely be faced with the cruelty of regretting that they were born in this world. Your Majesty, the auspicious hour is coming. Eunuch Mu, who had been promoted to the chief eunuch of the internal court, said respectfully at the door. Li Hanyuan didn't even look at him, and he didn't mean to leave at all. He didn't move, and Eunuch Mu didn't dare to urge him. He stood there respectfully. Jingwan looked at him. Was he going to throw a tantrum again? Why aren't you going? She reached out and pushed him. Come with me. Li Hanyuan held her hand. You're the one ascending to the throne, so why should I interfere? The agenda of the ascension ceremony has already been arranged. If I were to meddle in it for no reason, it would be like drawing a line on a perfect painting. How annoying would that be? In fact, Jingwan actually wanted to go and take a look. She wanted to personally witness one of the most majestic moments in his life. Unfortunately, it was not allowed. Let's see who dares. He was the best example of a dictator. I'm the one who doesn't like it, all right? What's more, my body is heavy now, and there's still the conferring ceremony later. Can you bear to see me suffer so much? You. Li Hanyuan pinched her face. How could he not know her true purpose? Then wait for me. Okay. Jingwan nodded. Li Hanyuan didn't want to drag things out when he decided to leave. Previously, he had already sent officials from a Ministry of Rites to pray to heaven, earth, and ancestral society. Logically speaking, it was more appropriate for Li Hanyuan to do it himself. The previous emperors of the Qi Yuan were all like this. However, if one looked back at history, it wasn't necessarily so. When Li Hanyuan made the decision, not only did the officials not object, they even found excuses for him. Because Emperor Lucheng was still living well, Li Hanyuan didn't need to wear mourning clothes. He was dressed in a luxurious and complicated crown. At this moment, he no longer concealed his aura. The auspicious time had arrived, and he walked step by step up to the Fengtian gate. He had the bearing of the Son of Heaven, the prestige of an emperor. What was the meaning of a sovereign descending to the world? He was it. When Li Hanyuan was praying to heaven and earth, the civil and military officials were led into the palace. They stood in the officialdom outside the Fengtian Hall and knelt in 2 rows on the east and west side of the Imperial Road. When Li Hanyuan finished praying, he came down from the Fengtian gate and entered the Fengtian Hall. The drums sounded, and the people in the hall took their positions. The courtiers tidied their robes and entered according to their official rank. The black-clothed guards cracked their whips. The generals rolled up the curtains, and the master of ceremonies shouted salutes. During this time, there was a burst of ceremonial music. When the civil and military officials shouted, "Long live the emperor," 3 times, the musicians shouted in unison. Their voices resounded throughout the hall. On the throne, Li Hanyuan was very calm. He had experienced this once in his previous life. At that time, his state of mind was different from now. At that time, he was in a state of madness that he didn't even know about. The same thing was that he didn't feel the excitement of ruling the world. Finally, it was the Imperial Edict. The Imperial Edict went from inside to outside the Meridian Gate and then to the Fengtian Hall. At this point, it was announced to the world that the new emperor had ascended the throne. His name was Yuanqi, and this was the first year of Yuanqi. This era name was set by Li Hanyuan himself. To a certain extent, it was simply too conceited. At this time, it was the Empress's coronation ceremony. Because of Jingwan's special situation, some of the complicated agenda was basically omitted. However, there was not a trace of the dignity that should have been there. Previously, when Li Hanyuan ascended the throne, the officials had already brought the Empress's coronation in when they prayed to heaven, earth, and the ancestral temple. This step was directly omitted. And because it was being held in the Fontian Hall, the ceremonial servants should have set up a treasure table and other necessary things in front of the throne the day before. Now, they could only quickly remove the things that were originally used for the coronation ceremony and replace them. Li Honyuan had already left the Fontian Hall with the officials. Compared to the coronation ceremony, Li Honyuan seemed to be more interested in Jingwan's coronation ceremony. The moment he stood up from the throne, his expression was even more solemn and dignified. Armored guards and palace ceremonial attendants lined up on both sides of the palace door. The palace played ceremonial music. The incense table and other necessary items were set up for the coronation ceremony. There were singing and dancing artists set up on both sides of the palace door. Everything was ready. The emperor's coronation master rang the drum 3 times. The officials and Li Honyuan entered the Fontian Hall. The officials of the Ministry of Rites presented Li Hongyuan's coronation ceremony book and the empress's seal on the table prepared in advance. The officials stood in their previous positions in their respective halls. Then, the music started. The emperor and ministers bowed 4 times. After the officials stood up, the music stopped. The ceremonial servant stepped forward. "Emperor, may we begin the empress's coronation ceremony?" Li Honyuan raised his hand. "Allow." The ceremonial servant walked out from the middle door. He walked down the steps and reached the position where the decree was to be read out. The official read out the decree. "Luo is conferred the title of empress. You are ordered to carry out the ceremony." The official and the deputy knelt down. They stood up. The ceremonial servant entered the hall from the west door. The deacon raised the book and the treasure table. After several ceremonies, the book and the seal were returned to the table. At this time, the ceremonial music was played. The official and the deputy knelt 4 times. They stood up. The music stopped. The ceremonial music sounded again. The ceremonial servant led the way. The ceremonial servant followed closely behind. After leaving the Fontian Hall, the music stopped. The ceremonial servant shouted, "The ceremony is over." Li Honyuan stood up. The officials retreated. The ceremonial servant sealed the decree. The ceremonial servant stood beside the dragon pavilion where the books were stored. The ceremonial servant and the ceremonial servant led the way. Outside the central palace, the music started. Although Jingwan didn't participate in the whole process, there were people who reported the details to her. Sitting in the hall, Jingwan's thoughts drifted. It seemed like she was thinking a lot, but it also seemed like she wasn't thinking about anything. Nyang Nyang, the emperor, came with the ceremonial servant. When Jingwan heard this, she came back to her senses. He shouldn't have come in person, but he wanted to personally confer the title for her. Her gaze landed on the 9 dragons and 4 phoenixes crown. It looked exquisite and heavy. Even though she was prepared, she still felt a little strange when she saw it. She still couldn't pinpoint the exact reason. "Nanny, help me put it on." When Mama Gong heard this, she quickly and carefully put it on for Jingwan. The emperor is right. No one is more suitable for this dress than Yang Yang. She sincerely praised. Jingwan smiled and didn't say much. It was hard to say, but this phoenix's crown was really heavy. Mama Gong helped Jingwan stand up and walked out of the Koini Palace. The imperial palace was located in the south and faced the north. All the main halls were like this. Jingwan stood in the main hall facing the south. At this time, in front of the Koini Palace, everything was prepared. Li Honyuan didn't come in carriage. Hundreds of officials accompanied him. The rest of the people were on the side. It was vast and mighty, showing the majesty and nobility of the imperial family. When they arrived, the music stopped. Everyone respectfully welcomed the emperor. Then, Jingwan followed the agenda and was led out of the hall. She met Li Hongyuan's eyes. Li Hongyuan's originally stern face completely softened at this moment. The MC led the attendants to their positions. Originally, the treasured book and the treasured seal should have been handed over to the inner emissary by the head emissary and the vice emissary respectively, and then handed over to the eunuchs by Jingwan's side. However, Li Honyuan changed this. The head envoy led Jingwan down the steps and stood in the center of the courtyard, right in front of Li Honyuan. The head envoy said, "There are rules." Jingwan should have knelt down, but Li Hongyuan reached out to help her. Some things were self-evident. The others also pretended not to see it. Anyway, the emperor had done what he shouldn't do, so he didn't care about it. The music started. Jingwan stood up after 4 kowtows, and the music stopped. After the announcement, the treasured book was handed over to the eunuch to read aloud. Then, the treasured book fell into the hands of Li Hongyuan, who personally handed it over to Jingwan. Jingwan should have knelt down to receive it, but she also stood up. Then, she handed it over to the eunuch beside her. The process of handing over the treasured seal was the same. From the beginning to the end, Jingwan was smiling. There were so many people around, but she seemed to only have eyes for Li Hongyuan, and Li Hongyuan was the same. However, she still restrained herself. Even if she didn't put the others in her eyes, she didn't do anything inappropriate to provoke them. The MC said, "The ceremony is over." Jingwan stood up and bowed again. At this point, the Empress's coronation ceremony was over. Originally, at the end, Li Hongyuan needed to bring Jingwan to the first offering hall to pay respects to the ancestors. However, Li Hongyuan was obviously not interested in this. However, the civil and military officials were all present, and there were so many people in the inner court. Jingwan used her sleeves to cover it up and smiled as she pulled Li Hongyuan's sleeves. "You've done so many things, and the officials are all backing you up. When it comes to the people of the world, you should at least give them some face and not be too ruthless." Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan, and in the end, he chose to compromise. The officials saw this and were more or less comforted. Finally, when they returned to the first offering hall, Jingwan bowed 8 times to Li Hongyuan, who was sitting on the throne. Li Hongyuan came down, personally helped her up, and led her to the throne. Inside and outside the first offering hall, civil and military officials, musicians, and military school. Long live the 5 emperors! Long live the Empress! Long live the Empress! Long live the Empress! The cheers resounded throughout the world. After the ceremony ended, Li Hongyuan ordered a banquet to be held. He invited the civil and military officials, many madams, and members of the imperial family to a banquet. Because the banquet was exceptionally grand, it took up a lot of space, and there were several halls connected. Before the banquet, imperial edicts were issued one after another, such as amnesty for the world, conferring Qin Shufei the title of Grand Imperial Concubine, bestowing Sikan Palace with the honor of being the Empress Dowager, and conferring titles to Li Hongyuan's brothers. Of course, they only received one imperial edict. Then, there were the officials who supported him in his ascension. Of course, these people might not be promoted, but they would still receive some basic rewards. As for the rest, he would talk about it later. When encountering someone like Li Hongyuan, there was no need to think about anything more. It was better to be honest. He would not be stingy with what was rightfully yours, but no one could ask him for it. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan shared the throne, and there was no extra seat next to the throne. The emperor's love for the empress reached a new level in everyone's hearts. The banquet lasted from noon to night. It was rare that there was no fighting and scheming. Even if some people were feeling depressed, they could only hold it in. The next day, Jingwan gave a verbal order to summon the elders of her maternal family. No one knew what was said. The next day, Jingwan gave another verbal order to summon her sister-in-law, her married sisters, and her close friends before marriage. Jingwan's current status was completely different. Before Li Hongyuan's matter was exposed, how many people would have expected this? In the past, many people did not take Jingwan seriously. Even if they respected her, it was because they were afraid of the living hell. Even in the morning, many people were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. They wanted to see how long she could live and when she would die. In the end, there were still many people who could not come back to their senses. Jingwan sat in the highest position, and all the people who were closely related to her rose with the tide. Not to mention the Luo family. The aunts and sisters who had married out had the Luo family as their backing, so their backs were not soft. Now, they could not be any tougher. Their husbands' families, regardless of whether they were satisfied with them or not, were now flattering and coaxing them. Not only did they not give their husbands women, but they also repeatedly warned them to be good to their wives and not to fool around outside. Naturally, Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhou Shuang also received the same treatment. They sighed countless times. Jingwan actually became the empress. It seemed like a dream. Because of her first child, Zhou Shuang's life was not good. But now, she was the empress, and the family really wanted to worship her. When she gave birth, Jingwan was just a princess consort with no future, but she supported Zhou Shuang. Now, needless to say, it was needless to say. So, they hoped that Zhou Shuang could put in a good word for Jingwan and help the family. So, when Zhou Shuang wanted to enter the palace, they were more enthusiastic than anyone else. Some people wanted them to bring their sisters into the palace, but they all refused firmly. The empress only said that she wanted to see her daughter-in-law. If I bring my aunt into the palace, the empress might think that I don't know when to stop and hate me. I believe that is not what everyone wants to see. What else could they say? They could only give up. They were quite restrained at first, but when they saw Jingwan was still the same as before, they gradually relaxed. Because of the difference in status, they could no longer hold hands and whisper in each other's ears, and it was inconvenient for them to say many intimate words. However, the atmosphere was still relatively relaxed. Jingwan left Sun Yijia to the end and said a few words alone. Originally, because of Sun Yilin, her relationship with Sun Yijia was not pure. However, when she saw that Sun Yijia was calm and restrained now, she knew that the matter of Ding General Manor had affected her. However, she still looked the same. Jingwan could not vent her anger on her because of Sun Yilin. Of course, she was not going to tell her about Sun Yilin's matter. Sister-in-law, about the matter of Ding General Manor, Wang, Your Highness, you don't need to say anything. I know that they deserved it. In fact, I have to thank Your Highness. Jingwan sighed softly. How about you, sister-in-law? How are you? Thank you for your concern, Your Highness the Empress. This subject's wife is doing quite well. Back then, I was disfigured but still managed to marry a good husband. I don't know how many people were envious and jealous of me. Now, I have a son and a daughter, and there is no one else by my husband's side. There is also you, my younger aunt, who is the motherly model of the world. When I go out, 9 out of 10 people will say that my life is too good, especially those who once ridiculed me. Their tone is full of hidden bitterness. You have to know that when I see those people feeling uncomfortable, my heart will feel better. So, let's wait 20 years to see what kind of person he is. It doesn't need 20 years. I can slap them back now. I believe that I can continue to slap them. Both Your Highness and I can. Jingwan nodded with a smile. She was right. Chapter 589. After Jingwan sent them away, she was free again. After all, Li Honyuan had just ascended the throne and had many things to do. He didn't have much time to accompany Jingwan. Jingwan didn't need him to be by her side all the time. If he stayed in the palace for a lifetime, he would definitely dislike it for being too small. However, for Jingwan, the current palace was still fresh enough. There were many places for her to explore. Except for the palace servants who were sweeping, the other palaces were basically empty. Counting with her fingers, it seemed that there were only a few masters in the entire palace. She counted with one hand, but there were still more than 5 masters. Suddenly, she felt that the palace seemed to be boundless. So, there were so many concubines in the harem, which was still useful. For example, it made the palace look less empty. As long as there were benefits, Jingwan would never let them in. Even if all the houses were demolished, they wouldn't be able to live in them. Well, such a crazy idea was just a thought. She wouldn't really put it into action. However, these unoccupied houses were more prone to decay. Every year, the amount of money spent on maintenance would probably increase by a large amount. However, with more people in the palace, the amount of money spent would only increase. All aspects of clothing, food, housing, and transportation would definitely be an astronomical figure. So, it was better to leave it empty. Well, Jingwan was a good empress who was good at running a household. The palace was far bigger than the prince's mansion. Not to mention other places, just the imperial garden alone was enough for Jingwan to play for a long time. However, now is not a good time to dig the ground. But she would walk around from time to time. There were some things that she could write down and slowly transform when the time came. Because the palace was big enough, Jingwan also had many places to walk. After careful calculation, there was about a week before the child in her belly was 8 months old. However, according to the calculation in her previous life, the child was born from the last period. So, the child was about 34 weeks old. The whole pregnancy cycle was 40 weeks plus or minus 2. But usually, there was no problem after 36 weeks. Jingwan estimated her own situation and knew clearly the date of pregnancy. She might go after 40 weeks, so there was nothing to worry about. She was the only master in the harem, and she was pregnant. The child might be the emperor's eldest son, the future emperor. Because Jingwan was very precious now, everyone revolved around her. They knew that Jingwan was not like the previous concubines who were basically holed up in their own places when they were pregnant. Jingwan went out almost every day, so every place was clean to ensure that no accidents would happen. According to the emperor's love for the empress, if something went wrong, there would be a river of blood. Just like when she was pregnant at the beginning, people around her were nervous, but Jingwan herself was extraordinarily calm. The days passed so leisurely. Jingwan, like Li Hongyuan's expectation, gained some weight, but it was still not obvious. The former Qin Shufei, now old concubine Qin, came to the Kunyi Palace from time to see Jingwan. Jingwan often went to her place. Old concubine Qin was a peaceful person. Although they were at different ages, they got along well with each other. In fact, Jingwan actually thought about letting old concubine Qin go out of the palace. In some cases, she was very lonely in the palace and had no children. If she had children, she could take them out and raise them. Lu Qingdi's concubines who had sons were basically like this. Speaking of it, this should be the best ending for the concubines who didn't become the Empress Dowager after the emperor's husband died and didn't get the honor. Old concubine Qin refused. She had been used to it in the palace. Now, there was no intrigue, so she lived a very comfortable life. Besides, someone wanted to stay in the palace. Jingwan immediately understood that old concubine Qin was referring to the imperial noble consort. It was understandable that she wanted to stay close to her son. If she was still alive, she would be the Empress Dowager now. Of course, she would still be posthumously conferred the title of Empress Dowager. As for why she was not the empress, it was actually the imperial noble consort's intention through old concubine Qin. According to the imperial noble consort, she didn't want the title of Empress Dowager. She didn't want to have a closer relationship with Lu Qingdi. However, it was normal for the new emperor to posthumously confer the title of Empress Dowager. It was filial piety. Li Hongyuan was extremely unfilial to his father, so he had to do something else to stop people from gossiping. Li Hongyuan didn't care, but the imperial noble consort had to care. She also made it clear that after Lu Qingdi's death, her body would be moved out of the imperial mausoleum and buried again. After the initial busy time, the big shots of the cabinet and the 6 ministries were all filled. Li Hongyuan had more free time. Because of the great improvement of the memorials, it seemed that it would be finished quickly. In addition, unlike his father, Li Hongyuan left most of the things to the cabinet and the 6 ministries to deal with. He only needed the general things. However, don't think that you could fool him like this. If you really had such thoughts, your head would not be far away from moving. Ruan Ruizhong was a man of his words. Not long after, he submitted a memorial to retire. However, he was ruthlessly rejected by Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan's character was there. He was a man of his words. If he rejected it, it was not hypocritical to persuade him to stay. Unless you have one foot in the coffin, don't submit a memorial to go against him. Li Hongyuan said at the beginning that he would keep Ruan Ruizhong and completely squeeze out the remaining value. How could he let him go at this time? When he was no longer useful, he could pack up his things and get out. Those who didn't know would only think that Li Hongyuan was a rare wise ruler in this aspect. Only those who were involved in it would know how bitter it was. Luo Peishan patted him on the shoulder to comfort him. Old man, forget it. He is the emperor now. He is the boss. Everything is decided by him. No matter how capable you are, there is nothing you can do. Ruan Ruizhong looked at Luo Peishan, who was in a good mood. His face was dark. You old fox, don't think that I don't know what you are thinking. With the Empress here, you can leave at any time. You are very proud, right? Luo Peishan was indeed very proud now. In the whole capital, no matter whether it was a noble or an aristocratic family, who could compare with the glory of the Luo family? However, Luo Peishan was very sensible. He restrained his family and became more low-key than before. He was more diligent and cautious in doing things. It was not easy for others to take advantage of him. With more free time, he naturally had more time to accompany Jingwan. As a result, old concubine Qin came to see Jingwan less. Jingwan realized belatedly that it should be her husband's idea that old concubine Qin came to accompany her at any time. In the second half of February, Li Hongyuan basically stayed with him at all times. Originally, he set a rule that there would be a court session every 5 days. He did not care about whether it was a court session or a court session, except for the time during the morning court session. He even brought the memorials back to Kunyi Palace. Li Hongyuan was still so gentle to Jingwan that she had nothing to say. He was absolutely obedient. He hid himself very well, but Jingwan still inadvertently found his anxiety. It was said that pregnant people were easy to have prenatal anxiety. She didn't, but her husband did. However, Jingwan couldn't help laughing. She couldn't even tease him. Because she knew why he was like this, she was full of heartache. However, she tried her best to adjust her mood. She was in a good mood, because she knew that only when she was well could he be well. If she was affected by him and became bad, it would be really bad. In March, Gong Jiu directly lived in the Kunyi Palace. As for the rules, they were all nonsense in Li Hongyuan's place. Li Hongyuan's bad mood was especially obvious to the courtiers. As long as a small matter was not handled well, he would be furious. Even Luo Peishan and Ruan Rue Zhong trembled a little. However, they almost knew the reason. Because Luo Laoforan and Jingwan's mother were summoned to the palace by Li Hongyuan. It was normal for a woman to have a child. Although it was worrying, it was rare to be worried to the extent that the emperor was worried. The emperor was deeply in love with the empress. Every time people thought that he had reached the extreme, he would always tell you that it was not enough. The former Jin Qinhuang was a playboy. Now Emperor Yuanqi was a completely infatuated type. To be able to tie him to this point, the empress was also a capable person. The 12th of March was Li Hongyuan's birthday. In the past, it was completely ignored because of Lu Qingdi. Now it was the birthday of the emperor. Naturally, it could not be ignored. But until now, there was still no news. It was enough to see that the birthday of the Qi Yuan year would not be held. However, it was not good to give up on the birthday of the first year, right? Where it was close, someone still mentioned it. In the end, they were almost cut off by Li Hongyuan. At this point, no one dared to say a word. Luo Laoforan and Zhang Shi were naturally happy that they could enter the palace to accompany Jingwan at this time. However, they also clearly felt that Li Hongyuan was too nervous. When they said this to Jingwan, Jingwan was also very helpless. However, there were some things that could not be explained. Jingwan found that Li Hongyuan's eyes were bloodshot. This meant that he had not really closed his eyes for at least 3 days. However, at night, he was clearly by her side, but she did not notice at all. How could Jingwan not know that the day was getting closer and closer? In any case, Jingwan could no longer pretend that she did not know. She hugged him in a more uncomfortable position and pressed her forehead against his. Yuan, I will be fine. Really? Li Hongyuan turned her cumbersome body sideways and hugged her from behind. One of his hands landed on her stomach. At this time, he did not hide anything. I shouldn't have let you be pregnant with him. I shouldn't have. Li Hongyuan once thought that at that time, his brain must have been damaged to do such a thing. Ah Yuan, don't be like this. Jingwan did not know how to comfort him. In fact, what he really cared about was her death. The child was only part of the reason. If she was fated to have such a calamity, even if she did not get pregnant, it could be because of other reasons. He would still be in a constant state of panic. He might even become more nervous because he did not know the reason. On the 8th day of the 3rd month, even Master Liaochen entered the capital and entered the palace. That night, Li Hongyuan met with Master Liaochen. He no longer concealed his terrifying aura. Master, tell me, Wang will be fine, right? Ba, your majesty, this humble monk is telling you this right now. Will you listen? Li Honyuan clenched his fists. That's right. He would not listen. No matter what others said, he would not listen. Unless Jingwan was truly fine and could make it through these 2 days. Master, if anything happens to Wan, you know what we will do. He stood up. However, he cannot control his aura. He cannot see Jingwan. It would affect her. Ba, Master Liaochen chanted. Li Honyuan stood outside. The stars in the sky were not bad. He did not know how long he had been standing there. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Highness. Li Honyuan did not even wait for the palace maid to finish speaking. He turned and rushed inside. Jingwan was having an attack. When she was still a few days away, she had been eating and drinking well. But now, she was having an attack. This day really matched Li Hongyuan's past life. The terror of that moment almost suffocated him. Li Honyuan personally carried Jingwan to the delivery room, which was the warm room of Kunyi Palace. In a short time, the entire Kunyi Palace was bustling with activity. It was brightly lit inside and outside. Not to mention Madame Luo and the others. Even Grand Concubine Qin rushed over as quickly as possible. 8 midwives had been prepared. The imperial physicians were also brought over at the first moment. Jingwan did not expect the attack to happen so early. At this moment, she also wondered if she was going to have misfortune. However, she did not panic. She smiled at Li Honyuan. It's just started. It's still early. You'll give birth soon. I'll be with you. Jingwan looked at him silently. Okay. In the end, there was no way to drive him out. Whether he was with her or not, as long as she was not safe, he would suffer in his heart. The midwives next to him wanted to say something, but they were stopped by Nanny Gong's sharp eyes. It reminded them that they only needed to help the Empress give birth to the child smoothly. As for the rest, they should keep their mouths shut and not say a word. I'm hungry. I want to eat. Jingwan rubbed against Li Honyuan and said coquettishly, Okay, get someone to prepare it right away. In fact, there was no need for Li Honyuan to order. It had already been prepared. Now it was just labor pain, and it was not obvious. Jingwan could still endure it. However, when it came to eating, Li Honyuan took care of it. As time passed, the labor pain became more and more obvious, and the frequency became higher and higher. Jingwan tried her best to endure it. She even smiled and talked to Li Honyuan, but the smile became more and more forced. Yuan, don't be afraid. I'll be fine. We'll grow old hand in hand. The sun in March was already high in the sky, but there was still not much movement in the warm room of the Kunyi Palace. However, in the long corridor outside the door, there were palace maids and eunuchs kneeling on the ground. A group of imperial physicians in blue clothes and green leather waited outside the door. Without an order, they didn't even dare to move. Their bodies were stiff. Several palace maids in green onion shirts and jujube dresses were busy carrying hot water and tea trays. They were all sweating profusely. The Empress had a difficult birth. It was said that her pelvis was a little small. Li Honyuan was inside, and Madame Luo and the others were outside. They were restless and anxious. In the end, they couldn't sit still and went straight into the delivery room. They were still dazzled by the person sitting at Jingwan's bedside. Li Honyuan didn't say anything. He grabbed Jingwan's hand tightly, and his face was as dark as water. In fact, he didn't need to say anything. The people in the room knew that if anything happened to Jingwan, they would all be buried with her. Jingwan's intermittent cries of pain could be heard. Occasionally, there was the sound of the midwife's comforting voice. Even though they were separated by the curtains, the people outside felt their scalps tingle. Jingwan was sweating profusely on the Arhut couch. She was only wearing a loose robe. Her body was drenched in sweat, as if she had just been fished out of the water. Yuan, Jingwan called out weakly. Here, Wan. I'm here. Li Honyuan paused for a moment before responding. His entire body was stiff. Nurse Gong used a clean handkerchief to wipe the sweat off her face. She then brought the ginseng tea and used a small spoon to feed her a few mouthfuls. Jingwan's eyes drifted for a moment. Another wave of pain came, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. Because he was here, Jingwan didn't feel that the pain was terrible. Nyang Yang, if you're in pain, just shout. Don't hold it in. Come, this servant will count for you. If you push down, you'll come out soon. A midwife knelt at the end of the bed and advised her while helping her give birth naturally. Jingwan knew that this child wouldn't be born so easily. She had been very careful about her diet. She was afraid that the child would be too big and difficult to give birth. She didn't expect that her pelvis was small. Why didn't anyone tell her this? Ah Yuan, Wan, tell me. Let Gong Jiu come in and take the child out. Li Hong Yuan's pupils shrank. His other hand was clenched so tightly that it made cracking sounds. After a while, he loosened his grip. Okay, someone, let Gong Jiu come in. Madame Luo and the others watched anxiously. When they heard this, they didn't quite understand what was going on. It was not good to let a man come in at this time. The Empress's reputation was not only related to the Emperor, but since the Emperor himself had agreed, he wouldn't hurt Jingwan. Gong Jiu was actually prepared. He even brought 2 female doctors with him. However, he hoped that he didn't need to do anything but now. However, at this time, there was nothing to say. Instead, he tried his best to calm down and do everything he could to ensure the safety of the Empress and the child. Otherwise, he really didn't dare to imagine what would happen. Ah Yuan, go out, don't stand guard, go out. He could stand guard before, but Jingwan didn't want him to be there for the next scene. Li Hong Yuan lowered his head and looked at her for a moment. Okay. His voice was unusually loud. Li Hong Yuan went out like a ghost, but he just sat in the outer room. However, no one dared to look at him. That aura was too scary. They sincerely prayed that the Empress was fine. Otherwise, the palace would become hell. The 2 female doctors beside Gong Jiu went in first. They knew what to do. When Gong Jiu went in, all he could see was Jingwan's belly. Gong Jiu, Your Highness. Gong Jiu lowered his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes, waiting for Jingwan's orders. Please, I can't die. Jingwan was not only worried about how her husband would break down if something happened to her, but she also didn't want to leave him. She really didn't want to. I will do my best, Gong Jiu said firmly. Okay. Jingwan slowly closed her eyes. Next, she didn't need to do anything. Acupuncture and Mephizin. Soon, Jingwan was silent and fell into a deep sleep. Then, the people in the room witnessed the first cesarean section. It was bloody, but it was also full of hope and vitality. Then, not long after, they heard cries, which almost made the people outside cry. However, Li Hong Yuan's surroundings didn't warm up at all. The baby was washed and wrapped up. The people in the room took turns to look at him. It was a little prince. He looked healthy. Naturally, they were more concerned about Jingwan's condition. Under the signal of Madame Luo and the others, Granny Gong carried the baby out. However, Granny Gong only dared to stand 3 steps away from Li Hong Yuan. Your Majesty, get out. That one word almost scared the people who didn't care about anything inside or outside. Granny Gong didn't show any expression on her face. She didn't blame Li Hong Yuan, but she was worried about Jingwan. She lowered her head to look at the baby in the swaddling clothes. The baby's face was wrinkled and red, and there was some white fetal skin on his head. This baby was born to be noble, but he was destined to be disliked by his father. Granny Gong thought for a while and decided to carry the baby out to the imperial physicians. Gong Jiu was busy with the Empress's affairs and hadn't checked the little prince's condition. The imperial physicians, who were stiff, were happy to see the little prince. However, they didn't know the Empress's condition, so they didn't dare to show their emotions. The imperial physicians took turns to check the little prince's pulse. They were all sure that he was healthy. This was good news. But, Your Highness, you also want the Empress to be well, right? If the Empress wasn't well, the Emperor might strangle him with his own hands. The only thing they could do now was to wait. They kept waiting until Gong Jiu came out. Your Majesty, the Empress is well. Li Hong Yuan's breath warmed up quickly. His whole body was like a broken string, and he collapsed quickly. Reward! Then, he got up and staggered into the inner room. He approached the bed and grabbed Jingwan's hand. Wan. He blacked out and fainted. However, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. He vaguely heard people outside saying, "Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress! Long live the Empress," that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.